Welcome to this web design short course. This program is going to run for a period of 8 weeks, and of course, you're going to do an exam at the end of it all. I'm going to share with you a course outline later on during the day, but I'll just give a brief summary of what we're going to cover in this particular course. So, the objectives of this course is to ensure that by the end of it, you're able to create a responsive web um, page or website or web application that can be used on both mobile, desktop, and regular computer. The technologies we're going to use will involve HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So those are the core technologies that you're going to use or to learn during this particular course, and you're going to see how they fit in together. So for today, we're going to do some bit of intro on the technology, the internet, history of HTML. Then you're going to set up our environment where we are going to be writing our code and designing our application. So I think I'll jump straight into the introduction, and let's discuss what the internet is. So let's begin with the internet. So the internet is basically a connection or an interconnection of networks. So this is an interconnection of networks. What that means is that we have networks that everybody has their own network, then these networks are interconnected together to form one large network. So it means that everybody owns their part of the network. So for example, if you come to university like TUK we have what we call a LAN or a local area network where we have internetworked all our computers and servers together. Then we have something called a public IP that exposes our server or our network to the outside world, where now people can be able to access our infrastructure, and that's what the internet is. Now, when it comes to accessing the internet, there are tools that we use. We call them browsers. So to access the internet, there is a piece of software called a browser that allows us to be able to navigate the internet. So these are basically special software designed to enable access to web pages. Of course, you're going to look at several other softwares that you can be able to use, like we have email applications. They're not browsers, but you can still be able to use them to be able to access data over the internet. But our focus mainly is to build website and web applications, and not mobile and not email apps or things like that. Now, when it comes to browsers, we have two ways that we can be able to access the internet. We access the internet via protocols, and there are two protocols that are going to be very synonymous with our course. One of them is called HTTP, which in full means Hypertext Markup Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So that's what HTTP means in full. So when we want to access the internet, we're going to access it via HTTP. This one is unsecured, it's the older way of accessing it. Then we have its other secure variant called HTTPS, or secure HTTP. So what this does is that it enables us now to have HTTP, but now in a bit secure manner. For example, if we are accessing things like banking applications, places where the data is received, we have different layers of the internet. We have the public internet, which basically is where everybody can be able to go and get data. Like, for example, if you go to the TUK website, you can just be able to get all the information as far as TUK is concerned publicly without requiring you to log in or things like that. So at that point, we can use HTTP because data there needs not to be secure. But of course, we're using HTTPS because we don't want people to be able to make changes to that content. So we still secure it with HTTPS, which means that the data is encrypted. It's not sent over in plain text. But in applications like maybe say banking applications, a backend application where I need to provide things like marks or things like that, I need to provide some credentials, and these credentials cannot be sent over as plain text. That is username, password combination, and hence that's where HTTPS comes in. So it enables you to be able to to crumble the data so that it's not sent over, not sent in plain text. So it is crumbled even if somebody was able to listen to the data, they are not able to access it in plain text. So generally, for when it comes to creating websites or web applications, these are going to be very important. One, these applications are going to run over the internet or intranet. So we also have intranet. Intranet is internal network. Like for example, in Tuk, we have a local area network and even a wide area network, but this is considered an intranet, so internal network within a specific organization. LAN is local area network, WAN is wide area network, which means it can cover more than one geographical area. For example, in Tuk, we have the main campus, we have a hostel in South B, and we have another hostel in Upper Hill. So all these three facilities are connected with a wide area network. So they're using the same network, but then now we have extended the range of the network to be able to cover multiple geographical locations, hence the WAN and not LAN. And of course, this is the intranet, and intranet in short is generally an internal network configured in any other way. So as we are going to design our application, it's going to run either on LAN or on WAN. Now you're going to use a browser to be able to access the application, and I've explained what the browser is, and of course we are going to access this website or web application using protocols called HTTP, which is Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and HTTPS, which is the secure part. And this is important when you're dealing with very sensitive information where you require users to log in, you want to send over sensitive data like documents and things like that. So we have to secure that data so that even if somebody was able to eavesdrop on the data, they cannot be able to make sense out of it. All right, so that is just a brief overview of what the internet is all about and how we can be able to use it. Now, let's talk about HTML. So one of the languages that you're going to learn within the next, I think 3 weeks or so, is going to be HTML. So HTML is a publishing language. It's not a programming language per se. Why it's not a programming language is that it does not support logic. Logic is things like decision making, for example, things like control structures, and the like. So you're going to see how that works out later on when you start using JavaScript. Maybe for now, it might not make sense. But HTML is basically used for publishing purposes. So for example, it tells the browser what to output. So for example, I want to output a heading, for example. I'll tell the browser, I want you to output a heading. As simple as that. I want you to output a paragraph. Maybe I want you to output an image. I want you to output a button, things like that. So that's what HTML really does. And we want to look at it in detail from its history and how we actually use it for constructing our web applications. Now, before we look at HTML, there's something else we need to look at, which is the development environment. So for us to write HTML code, we must have some sort of a development environment which we are going to use to write our code. And the development environment we need is basically a set of tools that make it easier for us to write code and test how the code is working. So for the development environment, we need something called a code editor. We're going to be writing the code. So code editor is a tool that allows us to be able to write the code. We also need a browser. This one will allow us to test how the application works. Okay, then we can have other tools like maybe say a word editor, maybe for taking notes or things like that. But most importantly, I'm going to focus on these first two and the extensions that it comes with. The extensions that make it easier to come with. Now, code editor with inbuilt test tools. So some have test tools, etc. These ones are referred to as IDEs or integrated development environments. So when you have a code editor that has testing tools, it has debugging tools, it has inbuilt browser, debugging tools, Debugging is removing errors. So this would be called an IDE, and I want to install an IDE which will give me a code editor with these other tools. So I need a code editor. I will need extensions to help me run the applications or test the pages. I'll need the testing tools to check if everything is okay and where errors are coming from. Then I'll need debugging tools which can be able to identify the errors for me, where they come from, and possibly how they can be resolved. So that's going to be very important for us to use. Now we have a lot of uh, code editors out there. So examples of code editors include Visual Studio Code. This is from Microsoft. It's free. We also have Metal. There are so many others that are commercial. They're not free of charge. So what we're going to focus on is Visual Studio Code because it's a free tool to implement. So let's go ahead, get Visual Studio Code, install it, then we can be able to see how to add the extension and the other tools that we need to make the environment ready for us to be able to write our code and test our application. So to download Visual Studio Code, what you're going to do is basically you're going to open a browser window, then you'll go to google.com, then just type Visual Studio Code or VS Code. Then you can see it's code.visualstudio.com. I simply come to download here. It is intelligent enough. It's going to detect what kind of environment you are running on. So for example, if you're running on Windows, it's going to give you Windows and ask you, what do you want to install? I will simply say I want to use the system installer, and my computer is a 64-bit operating system, which is Windows 10 and 11. Most of them are 64-bit. So I'll simply click on this 64-bit version over here. Then it will start the download. So if you come up here, you'll be able to see that it has actually started the download. So just do the download until you're done, then you can run the installer. It's as simple and as straightforward as that. No complications at all. All right, so that is how you obtain Visual Studio Code. So of course, once you download it and you click on it, it will launch the installer. You just need to click next until you're done. Then that's basically it. Now, no special configuration needed from your end to set it up and make sure it is running. So because I already have it installed, maybe you can go through that process by yourself to make sure that you have it ready. So once you have Visual Studio Code, the next thing that you need to do is to get a browser. So for you to get a browser, simply open another Google window, and depending on your preference, there's so many browsers out there that you can be able to use. We have Google Chrome, which is my favorite. We have Microsoft Edge. We have Opera. We have Firefox, and so forth and so forth. So really, almost all these browsers will give you ways to be able to access your web pages, which are published, and at the same time, they have tools that will enable you to test the applications, debug the application, and so forth and so forth. So most of the tools are going to be there, but I prefer to use Chrome. So if you're like me and you prefer to use Chrome, just go back to Google, then you come and say Chrome download. So just say Chrome, then you're going to say download now, and of course it will give you the most recent version of Chrome to install. So it's going to run and ask me, okay, there's something that's going to come. Simply click on the setup. As you can see down here, I don't know if it has not started downloading, but probably it will download. Then I can follow these 3 steps and I'll be able to install Chrome. As you can see, I'm using the same Chrome to access the internet over here. So it means that I've already installed it on my place, so I don't need to do anything extra from that. So those are the 2 tools that you need the most: an IDE or a code editor, and a browser. And of course, a word editor like the one I'm using right over here, so that I can now be able to take notes, brainstorm, and do things like that. So I can plan my work and do several things on it. So you can do any spreadsheet if you need to, but my concern for now is the code editor and the browser. So once you have the code editor and the browser installed, the next thing to do is you need to open the code editor. In this particular case, since I'm using Windows, I can go to Start. Then I go to all programs. Then I go to Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code over here, as you can see, then I open it. So once I open it, it's going to open like this. Mine might look a bit different because I have opened projects before and I have been writing code for quite some time. So probably maybe yours would probably show something like this. So mine is showing new updates because I installed a new update and all that. Yours might be slightly different, but what's important is we have it up and running. Now, once you have Visual Studio up and running, remember we said a code editor will allow you to do several things. For example, it will allow you to type code. At the same time, it will come with debugging tools and also formatting tools and so on and so. So there are so many extensions that you can be able to install inside the IDE so that now it enables a very smooth experience when it comes to writing and testing your code. So that's the most important thing at the end of the day. So what you're going to do is we're going to come to Visual Studio Code over here. Then you're going to come to extensions over here. Extensions are the things or the plugins that you install to enable you do certain works easily. So one of the extensions that I'll need to install is called Live Server. What Live Server does is that it allows you to be able to see changes that are happening directly to your page as you write it. So if you're outputting some data, if you're formatting it and so on and so forth, it will automatically refresh the page for you. So you don't need to do the refresh over and over again. It's a very nice tool as you're going to see. So Live Server, just click on it. I already installed it. So in your case, you're going to see install instead. But because I've already installed it, I'm not able to see install. But in your case, when you click on it and you say install, it will basically install the live server. Then when you come down here, you're going to see these go live. And as you can see, it says click to run live server. So depending on the page that you would have opened, then it will be able to allow you to go to the live server. So that is Visual Studio Code, and that is how you can install extension. Now, you can install also extension like Prettier. If you want to format your code automatically, you can install something like Prettier. Prettier will prettify your code. So as you're typing, it will lint your code. As you're typing the code, it will format it nicely. It depends on what you would like to have. In my case, maybe not a very good idea, but as you can see, I have it installed so that every time I type my code, it is able to just format it nicely for me as I move along. And as you can see, this is a very popular extension. This one has about 67 million downloads. That is a lot of developers trusting this particular extension for purposes of beautifying their code. Now, so you can install as many extensions as possible. We have extensions for icons. We have extensions for the environment itself. We wanted to change the theme for Visual Studio Code, among so many other things. So as we learn along, you are going to learn these things and you're going to decide what is going to be useful for you or not. So that's what's very, very important for now. So now, the other thing that we need to discuss is probably maybe the Visual Studio Code user interface. So if you look at the Visual Studio Code, depending on how big your screen is, you can be able to see the menu up here. This is the menu. This is the menu, sorry. This is the menu up here. So for the menu, you can be able to access any command on the menu. So you can do a new file, you can do a new window, you can open a folder, and so forth and so forth. So there's another menu for edit, another for selection, another one for view, another one for running the application to debug, and so forth and so forth. So we have the menu at the top here. Personally, I don't use the menu a lot. Maybe once in a while. I prefer to use shortcuts instead. So as you can see, for you to start debugging, you can simply press F5, or to run without debugging, you can press Control F5. As simple as that. So usually when you want to step over, you press F10. And so generally, I like using the shortcuts as opposed to the menu, but you have that option for using the menu. Then, besides the menu, we also have now the navigation panel over here. So if I click on Explorer, for example, I'll be able to explore my my project. So every time we're working on HTML or any website, we call them projects. So I'll have a project where now I am able to do everything. So this Explorer here allows me to access all the assets that are inside my project. I'm going to spend a lot of time on the Explorer over here. Then search will allow me to search anything inside my project files. So it could be a text, it could be a phrase, it could be a function, it could be a file name, whatever it is that you're looking for in your project. Then you have Git over here. This is source control. Source control allows you to be able to maintain your code. So for example, you make changes and you want to know what you did, so that next time if there is a problem, I can just revert back to what was working properly. So version control will help you in achieving that. And as you can see, we have a complete menu for it. Then we also have the debugger here. This one will allow you to run and debug your application. Then here we have what we call the this is Windows Subsystem for Linux. So I have Linux installed on my Windows system because I'm running containers and so many other things. So I'm also going to get that menu. Then of course we have extension over here. This one allows you to be able to install all the extensions that you want to use within your application. Then I have other tools here like Cloud. Cloud is AI for coding, so it allows me to be able to, do something called vibe coding if that is something that you want to work with. Then, of course, I also have other testing where I can be able to test scripts or things like that. Remember, this is not only for HTML and CSS. I can actually write Python applications. I can write Node applications. I can write Android applications and so on and so forth. So these other platforms will allow me to configure tests. So if I'm using JavaScript, then I can be able to configure the tests. Then, of course, I have Kubernetes here. This is container orchestration. So I'm not going to get into that detail, but as you can see, it allows me to be able to deploy infrastructure as code. So I can create servers, I can create the configuration, I can do load balancing, amongst many other things, which is rather beyond the scope of this particular course. Then, of course, I have accounts here. So here I can be able to attach as many accounts as possible. So as you can see, I have my GitHub account over here. The synchronization is on. I also have cloud changes, and if I had connected to so many services and so forth, I'll be able to see them from here. Then, of course, the settings here will allow me to be able to perform certain settings as far as my IDE is concerned. So I can set profiles, I can set extensions, I can do snippets, I can do tasks, I can change themes. If I wanted to change a theme and so forth, I'll be able to access them from here. By the way, the same things that you have over here, you can actually access them from here directly. So when it comes to settings, for example, I could simply come to well, I'm not seeing the menu for settings here, but probably when it comes to tasks, you can see I have configured tasks over here. When it comes to themes, I can change the theme from settings over here. I simply say themes. Well, settings. I can do settings, then I do themes. So something of the sort. So again, it will depend on how you want to be able to work with VS Code. So we have the menu here, we have the navigation here, then we have now the code window over here. So the window that you have inside here is where we're going to be working on. This window over here is going to be a tabbed window, so we're going to be working a lot inside here, as you're going to see. So generally, and of course, we have the status bar down here. The status bar can be able to tell you if you want to open a remote window, if there are any problems with your code, it will be able to list them down here. Then over here, it will tell you which line, which column you're on. So as I press down, you can see I'm on line 6, column 1. So as I tab, you can see I'm now on column 5. If I put spaces, you can see how many spaces that have been put, which character encoding scheme you're using, the carriage line feed, the type of language that you are developing. For now, I'm not using any specific language. Of course, once I switch to HTML, it will change to HTML. And then, of course, here I can be able to run my live server. Then here, when I click on it, it will be able to format for me my code over here based on the preferences that have been set inside Prettier. So generally, that is the environment as far as Visual Studio Code is concerned. Very important for you to be able to have an integrated development environment, and a browser where you can be able to now go ahead and type your code in detail. So that is generally the environment that you're going to use for developing the technologies that you're going to run, in which case we're talking about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So let's look at the history of HTML. Or rather, even before we look at the history, let's discuss HTML in detail, because essentially we are looking at the IDE. So now let's look at HTML in detail. Now, HTML is an acronym that stands for Hypertext Markup Language. So it's a markup language. It's not the only markup language that is there. We have a lot of markup languages, like we have Markdown. We also have XML, or Extensible Markup Language. We also have HTML, amongst many other markup languages. So just like any markup language, HTML is a markup language, but it's hypertext, which means it allows you to be able to use text to navigate from one resource to another. That's the beauty of it, and you're going to see that right now. So HTML comes in. It was developed in 1989 by a gentleman called Tim Berners-Lee, actually 1995, because the World Wide Web is what was developed in 1989, but of course it became commercial in 1995, and that's where HTML came in. So I'll just open a brief window which will give us the history of HTML from when it started up to 2017, when it was last updated. So I have this window over here. So as you can see, the internet was invented in 1989 by a gentleman called Tim Berners-Lee, and of course in 1991 he invented HTML. Of course it wasn't public, and 1993 they've drafted the HTML plus, and of course in 1995 there was a HTML working group that defined HTML 2.0, which now widely publicized it. In 1997, the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C, recommended HTML 3.2. So in short, what it said is anybody who is creating a browser, these are the standards of how you're going to process and output HTML content. So that's what W3C recommendation does. So in 1995, there was version 2 of HTML. In 1997, there was version 3 of HTML. And in 1993, there was version 4 of HTML. In 2000, they recommended XHTML 1.0. And then in 2008, they developed what we call the Web Technology Working Group, or WHATG, which now established the HTML5 standard. The first draft was established then. Then in 2012, they introduced the Living Standard, which is what we are consuming to date. And of course, in 2014, the World Wide Web Consortium did recommendations for HTML version 5. Then, of course, in 2016, we have the World Web Consortium candidate recommendation, which recommended HTML 5.1. In 2017, they recommended HTML 5.1 second edition, and in 2017, they recommended HTML 5.2, which is the standard that is being used to date. So we have two main versions of HTML that are currently in practice. That is the one from 1999, that is HTML 4.0, and of course HTML5. So as we continue with HTML, you will find that they have been improving on some things. So maybe things like, for example, how the APIs work. Like, for example, over time, mobile technology has become the de facto device that people are using to access the internet. So when they are posting specification, they are doing things like APIs to allow you to access to access local storage, to access the camera, to access location, to access the phone book, protocols for calling numbers, and so forth and so forth. So all these recommendations are basically increments on HTML 5.2. So you'll not find them in HTML4, but of course HTML4 gave the rise to what we now know as HTML5. So we can use HTML4 and 5 interchangeably. Of course, I'll try to focus on HTML5 more because it is the more recent standard. So that is the brief history of HTML, developed in 1991 up to date. It's one of the oldest languages that we have had around. 1991 to date is 25 well, actually it's 35 years. It's 35 years, and that is not a very short time for a programming language to have survived. Most of them fall by the wayside. Now remember, HTML is a standard, which means that everybody will implement it their own way. So if you go to the different browsers that we use, like if I'm using Chrome, Chrome uses what we call the V8 engine, and the V8 engine knows, or rather has a way of translating the page and rendering it for you. If I go to Edge, or the earlier versions of Microsoft, they're using something called Chakra, which also had its own way of displaying the page. But because based on the standard, they will look more or less the same. Of course, that is what we call it is easily it's easier said than done, because everybody has their own engine and they're doing things differently. The only thing is that they are complying with the standard. If you go to Firefox, also has their own engine and they do things differently. Though when you look at the pages, if everything is done properly, you will probably end up with the same looking page. That's the beauty of standardization, and that's what these working groups were all about. They were creating standards that every company that is engaging in the production of a browser can adhere to, so that the website or you, the program, whatever you are creating, will look the same across almost all the devices, across almost all the browsers, even if the manufacturers are different. Now, remember, these groups, this W3C recommended, this W3C, the World Wide Consortium, the World Wide Web Consortium, it is made up of governments. It's made up of large software companies like Microsoft and Google and Facebook and all that. It's made up of universities, people who are doing research. It's made up of businesses, people are consuming the services, and so on and so forth. So it's not basically something that is done by a small group of people, but basically they are large working groups that are borrowed from across the industry, so that now whatever is implemented in those recommendations resonates with whatever is on the business side, on the technology side, on the governance side, and on the research side. So all these people are put together based on that. So that is the brief history of HTML. And I think that is quite a lot to take in. So the first thing we're going to do right now is we're just going to create our first application and see how the structure of HTML really looks like. I don't know if there's any question up to that point, because I've seen you in and out. Okay, basically I've heard that you've been in and out. So maybe there's some things that you must miss out, but because I'm recording this, you can be able to follow it up and see probably where we had gotten lost into. All right. So let's develop our first page and see how we can be able to work with HTML. Now, the first thing we're going to do, once we have installed Visual Studio Code, we're going to create a folder where we're going to store our work. So I'll come to my Windows Explorer over here. It depends on the platform that you're using. You could be using Windows, you could be using Linux, you could be using any tool, so to speak. You could be using a Mac. So it doesn't really matter the tool you're going to use. So the only thing you need to do is create a folder. So in my case, I'm going to come to Documents over here, and I'll create a folder, and I'll call it Web Design Shortcuts. So Web Design Course. Web Design Course, like that. So this is where I want to work. So what I will do, I will come to my Visual Studio Code over here, then I'll come to File, and I'll come Open Folder. Then I'll come to Documents, and I'll pick Web Design Shortcuts. Then I'll say Select Folder. Then it will switch my Visual Studio Code, as you can see. Then it is now plain. I will close the chat window over here. Then probably this is how your interface should be able to look on the first go. We, of course, minus the recent application because you don't have anything of recent. Just a second. So once you open your folder, you'll come down here and you'll click on this add new file. Okay, so you come here and say add new file, and I'll call it hello world.html. Now you can say HTML or you can say HTML. So whichever extension you want to use, either would work. I prefer to use HTML. So I'll say hello world.html, then I'll press enter. And as you can see, the icon has changed into this open close brackets. That is because I'm using Prettier. Probably, maybe if you're not using that, probably the look will be a bit different. But what's important is that you are seeing this. Then, of course, this is the file, and this is where we're going to type our code. So HTML, we said, is a markup language, and markup languages, what they do is they use what we call tags. So there are tags for doing different things. The tags for defining the document, the tags for defining the title, the tags for defining body, the tags for defining footers, tags for defining paragraphs, and so forth and so forth. And in HTML, we have two categories of tag. We have the open closing pair tags, and we have the empty tags. So most of the time, we will have the open closing tags in most scenarios, and in some very few instances, then we'll have empty tags. So as we are writing HTML, just keep that in mind. So for us to write any HTML document to begin with, we'll start with the tag called HTML. So I'll click inside the code editor over here. I'll open angle bracket. I'll put HTML. Then I will close the angle bracket. Now, the good thing with Visual Studio Code, once I put the HTML opening tag, you can be able to see that it also puts the corresponding closing tag for me. So it means that this is where the HTML document starts, this is where it ends. So that is how the tags work. So HTML opening, HTML closing, it means that this is where I start and this is where I end. So that's the first and closing tag. So HTML is made up of that tag first of all. Then after the HTML, we have another tag called the head. The head is basically everything that goes into the head of your application. So maybe I can run this live. So you can see it has opened a window. I may not be able to see anything. I'll put it side by side. So here, then I'll put this one. So as I type my code, then I'll close this. So as I type my code, you're going to see the changes happening here. That's why I installed the live server. So you have HTML and you have head. Now, as you can see here, it's written just the address that I have here and the text. So if I wanted to replace whatever is written at the top here, like I can see there, this one is written Google Chrome, this one is used thanks for downloading, this one is written Google Meet. So whatever, if I wanted to write something up here, I would use the title tag. So I'll say title like that. Then I'll simply say hello world from HTML. So once I save that, you can see directly that comes up here, hello world from HTML, because I have put that as my title. So HTML is made up of tag. The first tag is HTML, and you can see the corresponding closing tag. Remember I said we have two categories of tag. We have opening closing tags and we have empty tags. So far, all of them are opening closing tags. So if I have HTML, I must have a corresponding close HTML. It's just the same HTML, but now coupled with a backslash. Same with head. I have head here, then coupled with another head, but now with a backslash. So the backslash means I am ending the title, something of the sort. Then once I'm done with that, I can put the body. So the body is where the content goes. So whatever I put inside body here is what is going to be displayed inside this page. So for example, if I come to this here, from Visual Studio Code coming downwards, that is what the body is made up of. When I come to Google Meet, anything from up here going all the way down, that is what the body is made up of. Same with Google here, everything from this Chrome coming downwards, that's what the body is all about. So anything I want to output on my page, I can simply use the body tag. So what I could do here is I could simply say hello world from HTML, and I can put W here. So you can see automatically it has outputted the words hello world from HTML, which is a good thing. It means that now I am able to now write my HTML documents properly. I don't know if you're comfortable up to that point, because really we have looked at a lot of things. We have looked at the internet. We have looked at browsers. We have looked at the protocols used to access the browsers. We have looked at how to set up our development environment in terms of setting up a code editor, plugins, testing tools, debugging tools, things like live server for running components directly. And then we have also seen how to be able to now run our HC, or rather set up our project. Then we have created our first HTML page, which I've said this is going to be the structure of all the pages that you're going to be creating moving forward. So there will be a HTML tag and a corresponding closing HTML. We have a head tag, a corresponding closing head tag. We have a title tag corresponding to a closing title tag. And then, of course, we have the body where now our contents go into. And of course, now from the body is where we're going to be doing a lot of work. All right. So that, in a nutshell, introduces us to HTML and what it actually helps us to achieve. Now, this is a very simple example of a HTML file, because moving forward, we want to build on this. We want to make it a little bit more interesting as we are following along. So that was basically just our welcome on HTML. And of course, welcome really does not say anything. The other thing we need to do is for today, I want us to discuss our last lesson, our last topic, which is basically how to work with titles or headings. So now, even before I go further, just like any other language, HTML supports what we call comments. Now, sometimes you don't want to output something, but you want to have it as part of your code so that now you can be able to know whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. So, for example, I want to specify who the author of this document is. So I can come say here, author is Richard. And then, of course, date. I'll put today, this is 14th April 2026. And the objective is to demonstrate how to use HTML. Now, how to use HTML. You see this information, as you can see, it's coming out just on the head of the document and coming as part of the body, but I don't want this information to come out, so I will comment it. So there are two ways to comment HTML. One, you start with an angle bracket, exclamation mark, and you put two dashes like that. Then wherever you want to end the comment, you put another two dashes, then you close like that. So it means that anything between this and this will not be executed as code, but rather they'll be treated as comment, so that now they're only there for purposes of documentation and not going to be executed as part of code. So this is how you comment on HTML. Very, very important. So maybe sometimes you're testing something, you don't want some code to execute, you can comment it. Maybe you want to document what you have been trying to do, you can document it. Maybe you want to, put a reminder, or maybe put steps, or maybe just put some descriptive elements on your code for future reference. That is comments. So comments will be what you call the non-executable components you put within your page that are going to be ignored by the interpreter. Now, the browser is going to interpret HTML. Interpretation means when it comes to writing programs, there are two categories of programs. We have compiled programs and we have translated programs. So translated programs is where the code is executed one line after the other. So, and HTML is one of them, because it's going to be used across many browsers, across many platforms. That's why it has been put in such a way that it will be executed one line at a time. And of course, based on the standards that were provided for by the working groups, then the browser that you're using is able to output that detail. The other category of application we have is a compiled application. That is something like the Visual Studio Code, where I simply download the application, I install it, then when I click on it, it simply opens the application for me. Now, the good thing with compiled application is they are fast. They are compiled specifically for a certain environment. But HTML, on the other hand, is not meant for for any specific environment. You can literally run it on anything, on a mobile device, on a TV, on a computer, on a server, on Windows, on Linux, on Mac. It is platform agnostic in short, and that's why it is translated line by line. The ones that are compiled are built for a specific platform. That's why they have to be compiled beforehand. So as we are looking at that, so the comments are not going to be compiled or translated or translated by the compiler or the interpreter. It will simply be ignored as non-executable code. It's basically for documentation purposes, or even probably, yes, there's the documentation aspect, and whenever I want some portion of code not to execute. So for example, if I want this body not to execute, I can simply come here and I comment this like that. So you'll see there's nothing left here. So something of the sort. All right. So of course I can undo that. Then I bring back my body hello world from HTML. So that, in a nutshell, is how you work with HTML. As I said, we wanted to look at our last topic, which are headings. So HTML has 6 headings in total, with heading 1 being the largest and heading 6 being the smallest. Now, within your documents, the headings provide some importance. They denote some importance in terms of what you want to stress importance on. And of course, when a search engine is crawling your page, it uses those headings to be able to determine the content on the page and also rank you as appropriate. So headings are very important. Why is this so? Heading 1 should only appear once on your document. So it is the main heading. It could be the name of your organization. It could be probably maybe your key service, whatever it is you want to make pronouncements to, that becomes heading 1. And you should only have one heading 1 on the document. Then of course you can have some headings, which is heading 2 going all the way to heading 6. And of course these ones can be used and be reused over and over again depending on how you deem it fit. So let me give you a very classic example. Let's say I was discussing about Technical University of Kenya, and I want to, I welcome you to Technical University of Kenya. What I could do here, I will put simply H1, meaning put heading 1. Put heading 1 like that, and I close heading 1, and I simply say here, welcome to TUK, something like that. So if you look at here, this is text labeled as heading 1, and of course it's going to be big because heading 1 is the largest. Then of course when it comes to TUK, then I can go ahead and now tell you other things that you can be able to see about TUK. So maybe I can come here and say H2. I can talk about departments. And I can list all my departments. So you can see departments is slightly smaller. Then another departments, I can have maybe say H3. Then I have department of computing and info technologies. Something like that. So you can see it becomes smaller. Then I can have another heading 4. Now, inside the Department of Computing and Information Technology, I could have maybe the courses that they are offering. So I maybe have Deep Tech, CT. I have BTech, another H4. And they don't have to follow each other that way. I'm just trying to demonstrate how they are aligned size-wise. So there's Deep Tech in CT, there is BTech in CT, and maybe there's a craft in CT. Certificate in computer technology. Something like that. So as you can see, when it comes to headings, then we have heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, heading 4. You can have heading 5 and heading 6. So heading 1 is the largest and heading 6 is all the way the smallest. So as we are doing our page, as I said, remember, only have one heading 1 on your page, and that should be the importance. What is this page or document all about? That should be put at H1, and that should give me a summary of exactly what this page is all about. You can use to, there's nothing wrong with that, but of course logically your page is not going to be correct. When it's being ranked, then you realize that the ranking will be much lower if you use more than one heading. Okay, so yeah, that is generally how we work with headings as far as HTML is concerned. Now, I know that is quite a lot to take in, and especially since we are just getting started. But most importantly is you need to be able to have understood exactly how HTML works, how the internet works, how it is displayed on the browser, what are the tags like the HTML, the head, the title, anything literally in green here is what Neni is all about, is what all the tags are all about. Remember I said your look and feel might not be the same as mine depending on the extensions that I've installed. So yours might look a bit somewhat different, but at the end of the day, what's important is for us to be able to know that this is a tag, this way it starts, this way it ends, this is a comment, this is content in terms of what I want to output, and so forth and so forth. So I think I will take break at that. I will share the video of what we have discussed. So just look at it and try to familiarize yourself with the things that you've discussed today, so that moving forward it becomes easier for us to be able to see how this moves in. Is there any question up to that point? Yeah, I know you've been on and off, so probably maybe challenges of the internet or maybe the environment. So hopefully, when we are meeting next time, that should not be there, and we should be able to, make sure that you're able to follow smoothly. But I'm going to share this so that you can now try to look at it and try to recreate whatever we have done and see how this works out. Any question up that point? Yeah, I know you have a challenge with your microphone, so probably maybe I'll switch to the window to check if you have anything on the chat. Actually, I think I was on the same window with the chat. Okay, so I'm not seeing anything on the chat, so it means that you're good. Anyway, that's fine. So I think I will take break here. I will share with you, I'll upload this video on YouTube and I'll share it with you shortly so I can be able to review it and try to recreate what we have done, just so we are on the same page. So when you're meeting again tomorrow, we are at par with where you're supposed to be. I hope that's going to be okay, right? You can just type on the chat since I know we have challenge with your internet. Okay, so I'll just take a break. Then we'll meet again tomorrow. I'll advise whether it's going to be online or physical. Though sometimes I prefer physical when I'm at the universities to make our work easy. But I'll be able to advise you as appropriate. Okay, thank you and have a wonderful afternoon.